Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty fascinating. We're going to see how a crisis from 70 years ago over one little stretch of water might just be giving us a roadmap for the future of global power. And it all comes down to two places, Suez and Hormuz. Okay, so let's start by looking at these two critical spots on the map. On the left, you've got the Suez Canal back in 1956. Think of it as the artery of the British Empire. And on the right, the Strait of Hormuz today. That's basically the jugular vein of the entire global economy. Now, I know they look totally different, but trust me, the story they tell, it's eerily similar. You know, this whole standoff at Hormuz feels very current, very 21st century. But what's wild is that it's got these echoes of a crisis that literally shattered an empire. So that really begs the question, right? Can something that happened 70 years ago actually show us what's coming next? Well, let's find out. So, to really get what's at stake today, we've got to jump in the time machine and go all the way back to 1956 and the Suez Crisis. And look, this isn't just some boring history lesson, I promise. This event, it really sets the stage for everything that follows. So, how did it all start? Well, it kicked off when Egypt's really charismatic leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser, just went ahead and seized control of the canal. For the British and the French, this was an absolute catastrophe. See, the canal wasn't just some random waterway to them. It was their lifeline. It was carrying most of Europe's oil, and in their minds, it belonged to them. And what's really incredible is just how fast the whole thing unraveled. The invasion kicks off in late October, but by December, it's already over. And here's the kicker. The decisive blow wasn't even military. Nope, it came from their own ally, the United States. And this is the great paradox of the whole Suez affair. Militarily, the operation was a success. Paratroopers, tanks, they completely overwhelmed the Egyptian forces. But Washington saw it completely differently. They were worried it looked like old-school colonialism smack in the middle of the Cold War. So what did they do? They applied crippling financial pressure, and that forced a really humiliating withdrawal. So here's the bottom line, the really crucial point. Their military strength just didn't matter. The political and economic game had completely changed. Suez was the exact moment the world woke up and realized the British Empire was done. A new power, the United States, was calling the shots now. Okay, let's hit fast forward. We're jumping 70 years ahead to the standoff we're seeing in the Strait of Hormuz. And you're about to see some pretty startling parallels, but also one really, really big difference. So if Suez was Europe's lifeline, Hormuz is, like, the main artery for the entire planet. Think about this, 20%, 1/5 of all the oil the world burns goes through this one tiny, narrow passage every single day. The scale is just, it's hard to even wrap your head around. And the way the conflict escalated here, it followed a pretty frighteningly predictable script. First, there are major strikes on Iranian targets. So what does Iran do? It responds in the one place it can hurt the entire world by messing with the shipping. The effect was immediate. The oil flow gets choked off, and just like that, shockwaves ripple through the global economy. And this right here is that key difference I mentioned. Look at that chart. Over 80% of the oil from Hormuz now goes to Asia. See, back in '56, the Suez Crisis was all about Europe's energy. But today, it's about the economic health of China, Japan, India, South Korea. The list of countries with skin in this game is now truly global. And you know what? The stakes are even higher now for another big reason. Back in the '50s, the world had some backup plans, spare oil capacity, other shipping routes. Today, there's really no plan B. A long-term closure of the Strait of Hormuz, that's not just a regional headache. That would trigger a full-on global economic slowdown. Which brings us to this really fascinating, kind of weird paradox of modern military power. And it's one that totally echoes what happened to Britain at Suez. It's this idea that sometimes your greatest strength can actually become your greatest weakness. Think about it. Britain's Achilles heel was its financial dependence on the US. Well, today, America's huge military footprint in the region, all those massive bases and aircraft carriers, they're now dangerously exposed. Why? Because in an age of super accurate missiles and dirt-cheap drones, these incredible symbols of power have turned into giant stationary targets. And because everyone knows how vulnerable those targets are, we're seeing this quiet but really significant shift happening. America's traditional allies in the Gulf, they're starting to hedge their bets. They absolutely do not want to get caught in the crossfire. So they're busy building new friendships, new economic partnerships with other big players like China, India, and the BRICS nations. And if you want to go even deeper, there's a historical root to all of this. This current standoff didn't just pop up out of nowhere. You can draw a straight line all the way back to 1953 to a coup backed by the US and the UK that overthrew Iran's democratically elected leader. That single event sowed seeds of resentment that, well, are still bearing fruit today. Okay, so let's bring it all together. What's the final lesson here? When you put these two moments in history, Suez and Hormuz, right next to each other, what do you see? What is the 70-year echo trying to tell us about where global power is going next? I think it's this. Suez proved to the world that a military win couldn't save the British Empire from its political and economic fate. And the situation around Hormuz today, it might just be showing us that even overwhelming military force has its limits in our super complex, totally interconnected world. So the big takeaway is that old saying, often attributed to Mark Twain, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. The names change, the dates change, the maps change, but the patterns of power, of pride, of overreach, and maybe even decline, they tend to echo through time. The story of Suez and Hormuz, it isn't really just about oil and warships. It's a timeless and maybe a little scary lesson in just how fast the world can change.